Candy. Maybe you're about to go out and eat some candy. Maybe you've already been out trick-or-treating and you're sitting at home, kicking back, watching the train station with a bowl of candy. Welcome to the train station. Tonight
There's a lot going on about candy in Ken's mind.
Yeah, well, that's what, for me, that's what All Hallows Eve is about. You'll notice we decorated the train station a little bit. See if I can go to camera 2. But it's just enough to be classy, like a classy Halloween. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about how to stop your dog from barking. And we're going to talk about some ways that you can address that. We're going to talk about barking in the crate, barking in the yard, barking at you, barking at the window, barking at the door. Maybe we should talk about howling.
Oh.
Right on cue. And we got some barking as well. You know what? I think the pre-show might be over. It might be time to roll here.
Quiet.
I think it will be. Yeah, you know what? In today's episode, we're going to teach you how to stop your dog from barking. I'm Ken Steepe.
I'm Kayl McCann, the werewolf.
Welcome back to McCann Dogs. So we actually have a change of costumes as well. We want you to have a very happy Halloween, happy and safe Halloween.
Quiet.
We know that Halloween can present some real challenges. Who is that?
Quiet.
Is it B?
I think she's
she's probably spooked to the hair. So this is interesting. This is actually a good thing to talk about. Sometimes dogs will be sparked by something that they've never seen. Sparked? Well, spooked at something that they've never seen before.
It was spook and bark at the same time.
Yes, yeah. And this is something that sometimes we have to deal with some of our students' dogs and some of our own dogs, you know, if they haven't encountered something. And sometimes it's like a hat or something or like a rain jacket.
Like opening an umbrella or
opening an umbrella. Yeah, for sure. So these are some of the things we're going to talk about. As I was decorating the set tonight, I got a sliver, and it's quite distracting. I'm going to do my best to remove it over the course of the show. But in case you can't tell, I've grown my hair out. I'm just going to let this go, I think. I feel like it looks really good.
Yeah, it looks great.
Yeah. Make sure I'm right on camera here.
I look like my little sister on a bad hair day.
Oh, yeah. Very curly. Very curly. Mm-hmm. So if this is your first time here, my name is Ken Steepe. This is Kayl McCann. We're professional dog trainers at McCann Professional Dog Trainers, where every week we get to help more than 500 dogs to become well-behaved, four-legged family members. And every week we do our live stream show. We do our train station. And one of my favorite parts about the train station, if you've been here before, you will know that I do love to toot as we head on over to the train station. Kayl's just dealing with the barking dogs. They're not sure about this hair. No. So it's so appropriate.
Actually, you know who it is we're looking after my parents' dogs right now, and our dogs seem to be like, oh, it's just Ken and Kayl being weirdos, but it's my
classic, right?
It's one of my parents' dogs that's like,
oh yeah,
you're looking a little different than you normally do.
Yeah, it would be concerning for her. I see Eden Fraser joining us again. She's dropping in the chat. So couple of things. Number one, I forgot to do this last week, and I felt so bad because it's one of my favorite things. I want to know where you're watching the train station from. Where are you joining us from here in the train station? It's pretty fun for me to find out, and I mention this every week, but sometimes after the show, I leave the recorded version up for a little while, 24 hours usually, something like that. And I'm so excited when I go through some of the comments in the chat and the questions. It's really cool to see that you guys are coming in from all over the world. So that's,
can I have that green thing?
Yes. So that's always really cool for me to see. Green screen. There will be no green screen effects in this. If I had a little bit more time, I would have changed the colors of these, but we've been having trouble with the internet all day. I was actually really worried that I wouldn't be able to hang out with you guys tonight. But minutes before the train station, you know, it's like a Halloween miracle, I guess. Joining us tonight, it's Yolanda from PA, Lara C from Ireland, Julie from Milwaukee, B.A. Matthews from England, UK. Kathy's joining us again. Javier from Lima, Peru. Elizabeth from Grand Rapids. This is going pretty quickly. I see Connie from Delaware. Pat from Florida. Kay Boiling from South Suburban area of Chicago. Another Big Hunter 99 joining us. Bug Hunter 99 joining us from Chicago. Grand Bend. Patricia Thompson says, Happy Halloween from good old St. Louis. Karina is joining us. Stuck in traffic in Los Angeles, California. I've heard nothing but bad things about the traffic there. I was there a couple of weeks ago doing some stuff, and I could see how the traffic would be really crazy. Super crazy there. Eden's joining us from Australia. Stella from Serbia. Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for joining us from Serbia. Do you want to pick up there? I'm going to grab my drink because I ran out of voice here.
Chicago, UK, which is very early in the morning, late at night. I think there right now. Yeah. New Brunswick, Michigan, California. Yes, with the fire. Definitely, we saw that on the news the other day. We're thinking about you guys for sure.
Yeah, for sure. There's
Switzerland,
a lot of friends out there now.
Utah, Shandy Blake. Hi, Shandy.
Hi, Shandy.
How's it going? Knoxville, Tennessee, Connecticut, North Carolina. Awesome.
Very cool. The something else that I wanted to mention, because I'm pretty pumped with this. People seem to really like our team tees, but I think they look great, and they're so soft.
Super soft.
But we have team tees available for you guys. Link in the description below.
They're really comfortable.
Let's talk about barking. And one of the common questions that we get early on in some of the when we meet some of the students is like, when can you start to address barking with your dog? And this is something when we first bring a puppy home. Maybe you've brought your puppy home at 8 or 9 or
this
so
week
weeks.
Is so itchy. Is yours?
Yeah, mine's horribly itchy. I'm taking it off.
Okay, me too.
You know what? We'll just eat candy. I'll go get. We have candy, and we're not answering the door right now because I mean we're not upstairs. But maybe we'll just eat candy to celebrate Halloween.
Maybe.
She's in on it. That's great. So let's talk about, when do we start addressing barking with a puppy?
Well, typically when we first get a puppy home, I try not to do too much disciplinary stuff with them because they don't really know me yet. I don't really know them yet. I kind of want to get a sense of what their personality is like, what their confidence is like, get comfortable with the lay of the land. But then pretty early on, I try to address the barking in situations where I don't feel that the barking is appropriate. And I try to be smart about whether the dog is barking because, they truly have to go to the bathroom, or there's some specific reason that's appropriate for them to be barking. And then as the barking's starting in other areas, I will slowly start to address that because it's much easier to get away from unwanted barking if you address it earlier. Barking is a very self-rewarding behavior, and if they bark for it's something that they shouldn't for weeks and weeks and weeks on end, and then you decide you don't want to deal with it and you want to fix it, it is possible to fix it, but it's much, much more challenging.
Yeah, for sure. When we first bring a puppy home, we'll let the puppy get away with a little bit. We aren't going to be hard.
It's under control, though.
Right, and it's during that really important relationship building period where we're sort of figuring each other out. The puppy's had a brand new situation, but simple things like that first night home in the crate overnight. We're not just going to let the puppy bark until their voice is gone.
No, most of the time I'll just sort of let them scream for a little bit until they sort of settle and they relax, and then I'll praise them calmly and softly with my voice when they're a little bit more quiet. And if they're not used to being in the crate, then I might even get up and let them out once they've been quiet for a little while.
Yeah.
And then I'll sort of repeat that process, and then eventually I start to put my foot down about the screaming. Right. But I'm a little bit more open to that in the beginning, since I want to appreciate the fact that it's a very new situation for the puppy.
Yeah, so let's talk about maybe crate barking to begin. We're going to talk about so on our teaching plan. And if you've never been to a train station before, basically what happens is we'll talk about whatever we've wanted to talk about with you guys, but we do these for you. So if you have a question about barking, now's the time to ask it. And actually at 8:15, we're going to open things up and we'll do like a full-on dog training, puppy training Q&A. But until then, let's focus on barking. And if you have a question about barking, definitely drop it in the chat. I'll be grabbing questions as the show goes on. But let's start with barking in the crate, because that can be a really challenging thing, and so often people think like, well, he hates it, so I'm just going to let him out. And now he barks in the house, now he barks when I go away. So let's talk about barking in the crate. One of the most important things you can do for your dog is teach them to love their crate. We have lots of videos on the channel that will help you to really understand how to teach your dog that that's a safe place to be and a comfortable place to be. But it's so important that you don't just put your puppy in their crate overnight when you're sleeping. It's so important that you don't put them in there and then just leave them and keep your fingers crossed and hope for the best. We always suggest that over the course of the day, as fits your schedule, your puppy's into their crate for a little while, especially if it is a puppy and they're first home, because they do lots of napping. That's a perfect opportunity to pop your puppy into their crate for a few minutes in different places. So when we have a new puppy in the house,
we have like strategic places that we put the crate.
Right. Talk about that. We'll borrow a friend's crate, or I mean, we have lots of crates now, but in the past we have borrowed a crate. I would have borrowed a crate so that we can manage the dog in different areas around the house. Why is that?
We usually have multiple crates. We have one in the car. We usually have one in our kitchen, which in our home is like the sort of most central part of our house. It's where we spend the most time. And then we have another crate in our bedroom as well. And we will shift the puppy from those various crates depending on where we are, so that the puppy doesn't think that when they go in a crate they're banished from us or separated from us. They're always nearby.
Yep.
And that way they get used to being in their crate when we're, eating dinner, for example, rather than letting the puppy circle around the table like a shark waiting for bait.
Yep.
We'll put them in their crate while we eat and just let them sort of nap in there rather than just let them run around, because we're eating and having a nice dinner. We can't really be fully focus on the puppy, or we're not really going to sit and have a good meal, which sometimes we do that. We will focus on the dog and we won't really worry about having a nice dinner. But you want to pick and choose your battles. But I think it is important that the crate is in a more central area in your home.
Yep.
So A, it's more convenient to use, and B, your puppy understands that sometimes you go in a crate and you just sort of hang out and you sleep and you nap and you play with your bone, and the rest of the family goes about their day. Especially if you have multiple dogs, that's important.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we have our older dogs, we don't generally let our younger puppy and our older dogs be together all of the time. We would have our older dogs out loose like normal. We would have the puppy in the crate, and if we wanted to give the puppy some out of crate time, we would put our older dogs away and keep the distraction levels low and make it easier.
For sure. I see there's a couple people. So question of the day is what does your dog always bark at? What's that thing that they find so irresistible that they always bark? But let's talk about the 3 progressions that we have for addressing barking in the crate. And again, remember, this is a training process. So if your dog is barking in their crate, approach it like a training process. You are going to do your best to be able to communicate with your puppy so you can hear them and they can hear you. And what's the first thing we're going to start with? What's our first thing we do to mark the moment that that dog's making a mistake? And I think I've sort of nailed it.
Yeah, you might as well talk about it.
Yeah, so I'm just going to manage this. So the first thing we'll do is mark this with our voice. If we capture that moment that our dog makes that mistake by barking with our voice, that's the first thing we need to do, because if we're in the other side of the room, or if we march back over, hey, you knock it off, it's too late. The puppy's committed the offense, and now we've wasted all that time. They aren't able to connect those two things, the barking with that moment, with the fact that that's not okay.
And that happens because the dogs are within 1 second. So a lot of the time people are delivering their information to the puppy too long after the fact, and then the behavior doesn't change because the dog doesn't quite connect why you're, getting angry with them. So it's important that your timing is good so that we're addressing the dog appropriately, but also with fair timing as well, so that we're clear and we make sense to the dog. Now, unfortunately, when you have a puppy, sometimes puppies are maybe a bit more sensitive or a little bit more easygoing. And if you do something like scold them or say, hey, quiet, or something like that, there are some puppies that might go, oh gosh, no problem, and then they'll be quiet, just because they're reacting to the tone of your voice, not necessarily the word, because they don't have any idea what it means, but the tone of your voice. And if you do get a reaction where your puppy is then quiet simply because you've used your voice, then you want to praise the puppy. And remember, there's a difference between praising and rewarding. So we never want to reward, so give food directly after we've addressed something that we don't like. We want to wait a few moments before we actually introduce a reward, so that the dog is not inadvertently learning that when they bark, we tell them quiet, and then all of a sudden they get a treat. So, might as well just keep barking because the food eventually comes.
Right.
So it's going to be address the issue, and then wait a few moments, praise, and get the dog on the right track. And then after a few moments, 5 seconds, 10 seconds of quiet behavior, then we would then respond with our reward of some sort. And for some cases, you don't even need to give food. You could just pet them and give them some affection. That, for some dogs, that's more than enough. Unfortunately, though, most dogs don't respond to your voice in the beginning because they don't understand what it means. There's no credit behind it. There's no merit behind it. So often what you'll need to do is use your voice and then back that up with some type of discipline. And the first suggestion that we would the first suggestion that we would suggest.
Yeah, the first thing we would suggest.
Oh, Lordy. Is...
She needs candy.
Yeah.
That's what I'd say.
My brain is working a little bit faster than my voice right now. Would be to interrupt the behavior by making some type of sound that may stop or startle your puppy. So it could be clapping your hands, hey, quiet, and making some noises that way. It could be banging on the crate a couple times. And
yeah,
what basically it does is it startles the puppy, or it interrupts the puppy. And when you do that, very typically the puppy will stop for a second. And it is crucial that in that second that your puppy stops barking, that you praise your puppy calmly. We're really big believers in the fact that if you're going to tell your dog something that you don't like, it's equally as important to then say, hey, I like this. And if you only have a small window of time where the dog is doing what you like, you need to get your praise in there. Right. Otherwise, what happens is you're just, giving them negative information over and over and over again. And that's not enjoyable for you. And that's not enjoyable for your dog as well.
And something that's really important is when Kayl's talking about praising them, acknowledging the point where they've relaxed or that they've committed to being quiet for a few seconds or however long it is. Praise doesn't mean that you give them food. Praise is using your voice, capturing the moment, letting them know that they're making the right choice, that they're being good, but it doesn't mean sticking a treat in their face. And that's something that people often do. They think quiet, and then the dog gets quiet. They're like,
too
good.
quick to give treats sometimes.
And they'll feed them. Yeah. And the actual, what can actually happen, it's rather Pavlovian, but the dog barks, you say quiet, then you feed them. The dog barks, you say something, then you feed them. The dog starts to think, this is great. Every time I bark,
this word
a moment,
quiet means bark and I get food.
Exactly. So you do have to use your voice, praise your dog. Really it's funny, as a dog trainer, we see this so easily, but, look for them to relax. Look for them to not be focused on that thing that they were barking
Body
at.
language tells you so much, with the way that their eyes look, the intensity in their body. Those types of things will tell you whether they're sort of settling their mind a little bit. And then that's your cue as an owner, as a handler, as a trainer, to then say, good, quiet. The tone of your voice is also really important as well. On both sides of the occasion. So if your dog's barking, we often have people respond by saying, quiet, quiet. Right. And the tone of their voice is very uplifting and encouraging and wishy-washy sounding. And the dogs just sort of bark right through the person's speaking. So not that you need to yell and scream at your puppy, but it needs to be direct and assertive and more serious. Hey, quiet. Something that's a little bit more deliberate. And then when you're praising, it's equally as important that you're praising calmly and in a soothing way to get the dog to be more relaxed. Some people say, quiet, good dog, that's it, good dog. And it's like it's the dog all ramped up again. So tone of voice is really important when you're training your dog in all kinds of exercises, but it can be really helpful or hurtful when you're trying to teach your dog to not bark.
Absolutely. I see lots of people with great questions. I think maybe we should jump into the chat and we'll answer some of these questions. Actually, something that I just remembered before I forget, and I think I set this up correctly, but we'll see. So this is either going to blow things up or it's going to work. We'll see. So tomorrow is there it worked. That's nice. Great. So tomorrow is the opening of our free workshop. So if you're in the class, so we have a mystery box workshop every single month. It's a group that we send out. It's like fun videos, skills, tricks, whatever the thing is, exercises to work on with your dog. But if you're thinking about joining this, get in tonight, because tomorrow morning, one of the director of online training at McCann Dogs has set it up so that tomorrow morning you guys will get access to that. So I didn't want to forget. It's the final day of the month. I wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of it. So I created that cool little thing where I typed that. Yep. And if later in the chat, if somebody types exclamation point free workshop, hopefully that thing will keep coming up so that you'll have access to the link. You can check it out after. But
nice. Eden says, love my monthly mystery box.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that's it's cool. Fun. It's all sorts of different things. Sometimes it's a skill, sometimes it's an exercise, but it's fun.
I think sometimes it's like hard to come up with ideas on like training, and It sort of gives you different inspiration, things that you might not have thought of on your own. And then of course it guides you through on how to teach it. So if you're not really sure how to teach something, this will guide you through that. Now, Dan the man is not with us tonight. Normally, if you're with us each week, we have our good friend Dan Luton, who is our moderator. He's not with us tonight, but I know Shandy's on, and I think she might be able to drop a few links. But we have all kinds of excellent training videos specifically towards crate training, barking, all those types of things that we're going to cover. So we'll probably post a list of that there, and she might drop a link or two.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually, when we first started this, I had a bot managing the stream, and I think it just shut a bunch of people down. So just in case something comes up, I can turn it back on. But let's start answering some of these questions. I see Martin Bland, and I see a lot of people specifically are saying barking at people coming to the house, barking at people in the street. That's definitely something we're going to talk about before the end of the stream. So Martin Bland says, my puppy constantly barks when left, even for 30 to 45 seconds. Please help. We actually had something not that long ago where a student sent us a video. I think maybe one of our online training students. And her dog would get really excited. She had like a special area set up, puppy-proofed area, and her dog would bark as she started to leave. And a couple of things that we talked to her about was, number one, give your dog something to do. Like give them some pastime or a distraction, or give them something. But another important thing is part of your crate training. So if you're having trouble with your dog and they're in your kitchen, they're in your kitchen or they're in an area that they find exciting, and every time you start to leave, they bark and go crazy. The first thing I would do to try to work through this, pop them in their crate, give them something, maybe a chew toy, or maybe it's a Kong with something in it if you have to leave, and then pop them in their crate. With the effort that you've put in beforehand to make that crate a comfortable, safe place to be, your dog will be more relaxed. Sometimes when they have all of this opportunity, all of these things to do, all of these places to go, it's too much. It's too much for them. So if you just pop them in your crate, if you're going to pop out the door or head down to the post office or whatever you're going to do, putting them in their crate gives them a safe and comfortable place where they can relax a little bit. And in some cases, Martin, and it's hard, it was kind of a short question, but in some cases that can solve your problem. So let's see. There's so many good questions here. Connie P says, I have 3 dogs. If a knock or a doorbell goes off, they all go crazy. And we're going to talk about that, barking at the door. And we're going to give you a few steps that you can do to work through that. Maybe we'll jump back into that one.
I can give a couple suggestions.
Okay,
now.
Sure.
Number one, if you have a dog that's sort of the instigator, then I would, number one, separate the dogs to work through this and have somebody purposely come over and practice knocking on the door so that it's not during a time when people surprise you knocking on the door, so that you're ready. And start with the dog that's the worst. So the dog that's the most reactive, put the other dogs away, and be proactive. With most of the answers that we're going to give you, I think, will probably stem from sort of the same structure, because a lot of this will work with multiple situations, but being proactive is really important. So basically I need to prevent my dog from barking initially, because barking is a really self-rewarding behavior, and if they get to bark and then they get a reaction by that person backing away or talking to them or looking at them or whatever it is that they find rewarding, they're just going to keep going. Secondly, I would have the dog on a leash. So again, I would not deal with all 3 dogs at the same time. I would deal with 1 dog at a time. Make your life a little easier. Make the dog's life a little easier as well. So have the leash on, and as the person's approaching the door, I would start interacting with my dog. I might work a sit, I might work some look at me, I might get the dog focused, and I would use a very, very high value reward when you're doing this so that it's easy for your dog to focus on you. And then I might just have the person approach the door to begin and just stand there without adding any knocking, and just reward my dog for being calm. If I'm not able to diffuse the situation, I would then have that person who is standing at the door walk away, so that I'm lowering the distraction level, and I might go further away from the door with the dog. Just again, take the distraction and make it further apart from one another, and then bring it close again.
Yeah.
And then I might have the person, knock on the door a couple times, and I would reward my dog, condition my dog that when you hear that sound, pay attention to me, be calm, get rewarded. But what I don't want to do is have the dog bark and then try to shove food in its mouth. My rewarding needs to happen provided my dog is still in that calm state of mind. And if I don't find my dog's maintaining that state of mind, I then need to address the situation. But the issue with barking is that people don't take the time to train their dogs what to do. They sort of they get caught off guard with situations that just happen naturally, like people coming to the door or pizza guy showing up or your friends coming in, and then that all hell breaks loose and the dog's not on a leash, and then it's just this massive chaotic situation. And every time that happens, you really just set yourself further back. So the absolute best way to deal with a lot of this is to set the situation up so that you're in a controlled state. You have the proper training equipment on your dog. You have the proper rewards ready. You have somebody that's helping you that is ready to know whether they should come close or back off, so that you have all of those elements controlled. You're far more likely to build on success than to have to correct your dog, which sometimes we have to do, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to prevent and cause good choices to happen.
Yeah, I see lots of great conversations going on in the chat. And actually, I think this might take us in a little bit of a different direction. But one thing
I'm happy if you talk for a second. My voice is like.
So one thing we'll do when we are teaching our dogs to be quiet, or what quiet means, is teaching them a barking command. And I've noticed there's been a bit of a chat going on in the chat.
Really?
There's a couple of people talking about the challenge that they have with the. They're getting their dog to bark. The hardest part is for them to get their dog to bark. When they want to teach their dog to make some noise, their dog looks at them as if they're mad. I think that might be crazy, or maybe that they're mad, like angry. I don't really know. But maybe we can show how we bring a dog up to that level, how we get a dog to the point where they bark. We capture that moment, and then we reward the quiet as well. That might be something that we can head on over to the train station.
We could do that, except we have 6 dogs right here.
Oh, that would be
that would be all of them to bark. As long as you're okay with that, I can do it.
I think
it's going to go crazy.
Yeah, I think that's okay. I think we'll just get it down once. But there is a way that we can sort of build these dogs up, get them really excited, and capture the moment when they bark. Because I know that there's been a couple of questions in here about that. Now it's going to get off the hook. But you know what? That's what happens here in the train station on our Halloween episode, because things are over the top. We started out with you'll get to see these really cool decorations. That took me a minute. Oh, Hippie Shake will be a good one. Now, I'm going to have to... You guys are going to go muted for a moment because our second microphone's out. But let's light Kayl up. Oh, that's working. And now let's see if we can go to... Hi, Shaky. Go to camera 2 as we head on over to the train station.
Quiet. Quiet. Oh, I don't think this is going to be very difficult.
No.
Okay, so what you can do is, this won't work for every single dog. It really depends. Some dogs just really aren't that vocal. Hippie's a fairly vocal dog. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just start playing with her, and I'm going to get really crazy with her. And if she barks, I'm going to say yes. And then I'm going to stop and I'm going to give her a reward. I have a bunch of treats in my pocket here. And if I can get her to do it a couple times, then I'm going to start to put it on a command. Now, when you're teaching your dog to do something on a command, what you don't want to do is start off by saying, like, speak, 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 speak. Okay, one of the dogs knows that. Quiet. And, and she doesn't know what that means, because now she's hearing a command and then she's not doing the behavior. Not because she's naughty, but she has no idea what it means first. So whenever we teach a new behavior, we actually teach it in the opposite way. We first get the dog to do the behavior of our choice. Once the dog does the behavior, we then name it. So first I'm going to get her barking for a treat. Then once she knows that if she barks, she gets a treat, I'm going to then give it a name. I might say speak. I might say bark. What should I say, hun? Speak?
Yeah, try speak, maybe.
You can say whatever you want. Okay, so she's ready to go. As you can see, she's all fired up. So I'm going to get her a little crazy and see if I can get her to bark. Ready? Playtime. Playtime. Ready, set. Playtime. Ready, set. Set. Ready, ready, ready. Set. Ready, 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 ready. Ready, set. Good girl. Get up, get Good girl. She's not barking, but she's playing. Are you ready, set, ready, play? Good girl. So I got a little bark. So I'm going to yes, we're ready. I hope none of your dogs are watching at home, because they're probably losing their marbles.
This is a big headphone warning.
Ready, set, yes, good. I got another one there. So I'm going to yes and reward.
Kayl has recognized that when she says ready, set, that really stimulates Hippie. So she knows that phrase.
I got a little one there. Yes, good girl. So what sort of gets her going is me giving her like the claw hands here. It's making her seem a little bit more exciting. It looks like I'm going to grab her and then I get more reward. Yes, good girl.
Yeah, and that sound is also something that gets her really excited.
Yeah, no, quite honestly, right now, I can tell by her behavior, I don't quite get that she's getting a treat for getting the bark yet. I've only done it 4 or 5 times. So what I would do is I would practice it many more times until the barking was coming much more often and a little bit more on purpose. But again, I practice quite a bit now, so I would actually maybe do a different exercise and then I would come back to this. What you don't want to do this exercise is just keep going and going and going and going and going. That's not a super productive way to get what you want. So it would be do a little bit, go on to something else, and then try it again. And then I would start to add my command when I was pretty sure that when I start to engage with her, she was going to bark. So again, I wouldn't do that with this dog right this second, but I don't know if you want me to continue, but I can do something with a dog that does know it on command.
Okay, yeah. So to teach the quiet part, that's a good idea.
Teach it the quiet
for
part.
Sure. Yeah, I'll come back over to camera 1.
I'm stiff.
So
I'm stiff.
it does make it more challenging when we have a couple of new dogs in the mix, where Kayl mentioned that we're looking after a couple of dogs, but this is important for you to recognize at home. It might be the most unusual thing. You're gonna recognize something that your dog really finds exciting, and they'll bark. Capture that moment. Do it just as Kayl had mentioned. But when you figure that thing out, you can start to lessen the amount and add that speak command. Let's go back over to Kayl and we'll find out. You'll see how to use this speak, the opposite of the speak command for your quiet.
Am I in okay position?
Yep.
Okay, here, Funk. So this is Funky Monkey. She's a little bit older, and she knows this, a bark command very well. Now, I taught her to speak a bark on the command speak. So I'm just going to show you now a couple times that she knows it. Ready? Speak. Yes, good girl. Speak. Speak. Yes, good girl. Speak. Speak. Yes. One of the other dogs obviously knows the behavior as well. Speak. Yes, good girl. Speak. Yes. So in order to start teaching her what quiet means, I'm now going to jump between asking her to bark and then capturing the quiet behavior that happens after she stops barking. So I'm going to ask her to speak, and as soon as she speaks, I'm going to immediately say quiet. And I'm going to pause for only 1 or 2 seconds, and then I'm going to say yes to mark the quiet behavior, and then I'm going to reward her. So she starts to learn that barking is okay if I say so, and quiet needs to happen when I do that as well. So again, this is how I'll start to teach it. Speak, 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 speak. Yes, quiet. Yes, good, quiet. Good, quiet. Speak. Yes, quiet. Yes, good, quiet. Luckily, the other dog knows what quiet means too, right? Quiet. Yes, good, quiet. Good, quiet. Yes. Speak. Yes, good, quiet. Quiet. Everybody in the room, quiet. 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 Yes, good, quiet. So again, do you see how I'm waiting for the behavior that I want before I'm yesing and rewarding the dog? I really need her to understand what she's being rewarded for. So I don't say quiet and then feed her right away. I say quiet and I wait for a moment for her just to be calm. Yes. And then I can reward from there. And again, notice my demeanor with my dog. When I'm praising her, when I'm rewarding her for the quiet, I'm speaking a bit more softly, I'm rewarding and I'm petting her more gently just to keep her a little bit more quiet and relaxed. And of course, when I want her to bark, I can be a little bit more animated and a little bit more energetic with my energy towards her. Good, hon?
Yeah, perfect.
Can I have a hug?
Dropping knowledge in the train station.
Yes,
Microphone check.
Can I have a hug?
I know we had a mic drop out for a moment there, but I think we got it back. Some good questions coming in. I'm going to jump into those. Let's see what people have to say. So
Okay.
Lorena mentioned mine always barks in the crate only when I'm leaving for small periods of time. Go to pick up downstairs mail, not when I leave for work and such. So a couple of things, Lorena, you're giving your dog some sort of cue that that's what's going to happen. So what I do is, do your walk or do whatever that exercise thing is that you do with your dog before you leave them for any length of time, if maybe it's play or whatever, and then give them something that they're more focused on and try to break up that cycle. Get their focus on the fact that they have something or that they're tired and they want to lie down in their crate before you do the behavior that's causing this sort of stimulation. Now, it's interesting that you don't get that same response when you go to work for anything up for a long period of time. So figure out what are the steps that you're doing leading up to this behavior, to this response to leaving, that are cueing your dog that, okay, it's time for me to bark. Because sometimes taking one of those elements, one of those things out, or changing the orders, always, putting your dog in their kennel or giving them an opportunity to focus on something else will be helpful. But something that I really wanted to speak to that I saw in the chat is that someone mentioned that barking is it's a feedback loop. Barking is a self-rewarding behavior for a lot of dogs. So this is what makes it a little bit more challenging to fix this because it feels good and it's rewarding and they get a response.
Sometimes it accomplishes what they want, especially, if dogs walk up and they bark at you and then you pet them on the head. That's a form of reward. I see that happen constantly in classes. The dog barks and the person goes, shh.
Right.
And you're basically just telling the dog, I like when you bark. So, it's really important. Dogs are really, really smart. And unfortunately, they're so smart that if we don't have our job as a teacher sort of clear, we can end up causing problems that we don't even know we're causing.
Right.
And I think what people need to remember, and I see sort of towards the end of the chat, there are some people having some really great talks about training being more like coaching and you have to sort of stick things out a little bit. And that's so true. Life would be so easy if dog training was like just a few little tweaky magic tricks and then boom, you're done. But sadly, that is not the case. There are so many nuances and every dog is a little bit different. Every person's a little bit different. And there isn't, this perfect calculated step by step for every single thing. You have to be able to look at what's happening in front of you and then decide how much or little, how often, all of these things. You have to decide how you're going to deliver your information with the dog. But honestly, the best thing you can do for barking or things like that is to set it up and work through it rather than allowing those situations to happen on such a regular basis.
Yeah, I think we've talked a little bit. I see several questions in here about someone coming to the door, and we've talked about how you can practice through that, rehearse it, get a friend or family member to just knock on the door, and you're in training mode. If you feel like it's all of a sudden and someone comes to the door and your dog's going absolutely crazy, then take a moment, put them in their crate or in their kennel, because that's an overwhelming situation for everyone. And you don't want to reward your dog by allowing them to jump on that new house guest, or, allowing them to be maybe that person coming in is like, oh, I love dogs, and all of that barking and all of that excitement. Yeah, exactly.
Like lots of times I know, like when we've had a dog, Ken will come in the house and the puppy will bark and I'll be like, Ken, go outside again. Can you come inside again? Can you do that again? And we'll just sort of set the situation. We might do it 2 or 3 times so the puppy's like, oh, this is what you want me to do. Because most puppies don't do things just because they're blatantly bad.
Right.
They do things because they don't know any better. And our job is to teach them, in these scenarios, what we're looking for. And dogs learn through repetition. And so whether they're repeating things correctly or repeating things incorrectly, they're still learning. So, that's why it's important just to take the time to work through it. It's not easy, but it's worth it.
Yeah. So the next thing that I noticed that a lot of people are mentioning is barking in their home. So whether it's looks like the window or the door. I also saw, it looks like Melinda maybe.
Barking and jumping at people as they come in.
Yeah. Melinda mentions, my dog frustration barks when I ask her to be patient, like at a class when it's not her turn. And this, I know that
common.
Some of you guys at home will have a dog that you're sitting down to work on the computer, or you are doing something and your dog is barking at you. And this is really important how you address this, because if you just allow your dog to bark, or you ask them quiet over and over again, then that quiet word starts to lose its meaning. It's really, really important that you address it in that moment. And if you're having some of these problems, Maybe not in Melinda's case specifically, but we will talk about how she can address it. But if you're having these problems at home, don't be afraid to put a house line on your dog, because you need to. And it's while you're working on this, they won't wear the line in the house forever. But it's so important to be able to have more control and be able to redirect them, ask them to sit and be quiet, do these things, interrupt this behavior. So really think about it, focus on it like a training opportunity for you.
Yeah, and for those of you who don't know what we mean by house line, so we use a leash in the house, and our dogs, it's attached to our dog's collar, and typically it would be, a 6-foot leash in length, and we would cut the handle off so that it can't catch on things as easily. And when our dogs are young and they're in their training period, our dogs wear a leash in the house 100% of the time that they're not out of the crate. And a lot of people think that is absolutely crazy. And we think it is absolutely amazing, because when our dog makes a poor choice, hey, quiet. They make a poor choice. They can see my reaction there, guys. See how fast that was? When they make a poor choice, we're able to address it calmly without chasing the dog around and trying to get the shoe out of their mouth, or, we don't lose our cool or lose our frustration, because it's as simple as just calmly walking over, picking the leash up, redirecting the dog, or stopping them from what they're doing. And what happens, two things, is number one, our timing's better. Number two, we're addressing things in a calmer, more assertive manner, which is more effective for the dog. And number three, we have follow through. So the ultimate goal is that we want to be able to have our dog listen to us, whether it's to be quiet or to leave it or whatever it might be. My goal is that I don't want to have to pick up my leash ever. I don't even want to have to put a leash on my dog. I want to be able to have my dog listen to the commands that I give him, or her. But if my dog doesn't understand that she has to listen to me because I don't ever make her listen, then my voice and my control doesn't become very important. But if I say, quiet, and she just keeps barking at the door, and I say quiet and she keeps barking at the door, and I say quiet a little louder, a little bit more negatively, she just keeps barking at the door. Now I'm getting escalated, and she's learning, well, I don't have to listen to you. So what we do is we say quiet, and if they just keep barking and they don't respond, we calmly walk over, we take a hold of the leash, we say quiet, and then we would lift up on the leash to say, hey, knock that off. We don't like that. And once the dog says, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to, then we would calmly, good, quiet. That's the way. So remember earlier, if you were listening before, we want to make sure we're giving our dogs both sides of the story. I don't just tell my dog when it's wrong, and I don't just tell my dog when it's right. I need to be able to tell them both pieces of information, because they understand what I'm looking for. But my goal is, if I, have 10 repetitions, I'm going to tell my dog, 5 times more that they're right than they're wrong by changing scenarios. So if my dog's barking at the door and I have to correct that behavior, and then it happens again, and I have to correct that behavior, and it happens again, I have to correct that behavior, I then need to stop and say, okay, what about this scenario is too difficult for my dog to make a good choice? Do I need to get them further away from the door? Do I need to change the distraction? Do I need to up my reward? Do I need to up my correction? What is it? Because what you don't want to do is have the same thing happen incorrectly over and over and over again, because that's not productive training. So always evaluate what's happening and make sure that you're going towards the right direction, which is the ultimate goal, is that your dog learns to make the right choice so they can be rewarded.
I need to really quickly say hello to SD Cruiser dropping in, who dropped in on the Halloween stream, and John from You Do It. It's good to see you guys. That in Melinda, was it Melinda that mentioned that her dog was barking at her when she was bored? Or something like that. Like addressing it that same way.
Something
What's so important is that you're affecting change, that you're not allowing her to rehearse. So there's a good question. How many barks?
This is
how many barks do you allow before a correction?
Ooh, that's a great question.
Yeah, it's a great question.
I allow 1. And then I would say quiet, and then I would watch to see what I get a reaction. If the dog hears me say quiet and they bark again, well, that tells me that the dog doesn't understand quiet, or doesn't really care to be quiet when I ask them to. So then I would repeat my command quiet, and then I would add my correction from there.
Yeah.
So you don't want to allow your dog to bark and bark and bark before you do something, again, because it's a self-rewarding behavior. A lot of dogs say, well, yeah, you got after me, but I got to bark for 5 minutes and that was fun. So that's worth doing again. So try to be consistent that it's the least amount of barks as possible. This is good too.
Yeah. Oops. I may have just taken it down. There it is.
We can look at that one, but
I will. Yeah, I saved it. La Portia True Blood. How do I stop crate barking if I'm not in the same room? It usually happens when when I'm not in the same room. Well, I have a solution for you, and I can maybe I'll head over to the train station. You're gonna have to, when I switch the cameras, you're gonna have to turn this back on and make sure that the level's okay.
Okay.
Or do you want to do it? I'm happy to go
you do
over
it. Okay. You do it. My voice can have a
Okay, so this is really, it's
vacation.
very, very common.
This one here?
Portia. Yeah, you'll see it go. I'll show you. Okay. Maybe I'll just set it up before I go. You'll see.
I'm not about the dog training, guys. I'm not about the electronics.
That's really common to happen when you're out of the room or you're just a little bit too far away. Number one, it depends when it's happening. So if it's happening at night or something like that, until we have crate barking and crate training sorted out with our puppies, we will have them in our room, or at least within arm's correction or something like that. We can knock on their crate if they're getting absolutely out of control. But communication is so important. So something I've done, and something I did with with my black lab named Deegan, is she would do the same thing. She would be great if I were in the kitchen, for example, and she was in her crate in the kitchen. But as soon as I'd leave the kitchen or go into another room, she'd start to make some noise. It's hard to address that with good timing, and it's hard to follow through enough to affect change. So I would use my voice first, as we talked about. That'll maintain that same great dog training timing that you need. Mark that moment that your dog makes the mistake. But I'll show you what I did as I head on over to the train station. We'll turn this back on. I hope you guys can hear me all right.
Do I have to do anything now?
No, it should be okay.
Okay.
So here's what I would do, La Portia. I would have my dog in her crate, and I would set up a line, and a couple lines was what I needed. I actually used a long line, which was about 25 feet, and I think maybe 2 leashes. I allowed myself to get pretty far away. But what I do to interrupt that behavior, because it was so awful, and she would just get so excited, but I'll see how far I can get off camera. So just imagine this line. I'll go to the corner. And then I'm almost in your living room, or wherever you're watching this. I would Deegan would bark. I'd tell her quiet, and then I'd rattle the crate. I'd make some noise on the side of the crate. And that moment, that noise, she'd think, "What on earth was that?" When she was quiet for a few seconds, good girl, good quiet. That's much better. And what was so important that I learned with her, and it's something I often see with our students, is she would start to cue. Before she'd get to the barking point, she'd be like whimpering or whining or making some noise. I don't really love being here when you're out there. She'd give me this opportunity, and I realized I couldn't wait till the barking. I had to address the moment she started making a noise that was a nuisance noise, a nuisance behavior. So I tell her quiet, and then I rattle the crate. It's just enough of a jingle that your dog's like, what is that? And capture that moment when they're investigating that sound, when they're, they recognize that something's happening. That's when you want to praise them, when they're starting to be quiet again. So it was a super helpful thing that it's actually one of the suggestions I got from the trainers at McCann Dogs before I was a trainer. But
I think
you're
to add
likely
to
to find
that,
it helpful as well.
I think to add to that is while you're outside the room, that's when you want to praise your dog good, quiet. And then if they still are quiet for even just a couple seconds, then you can walk back in the room so that your dog learns, okay, when I'm calm and settled, magically you appear. This is a good thing. But take a second to praise them outside the room, because I do find that sometimes the dogs will bark and then you'll walk back into the room, even if it's to discipline them or to say get after them, and they're like, oh, you're here. I get to see you again. So try to address the dog outside the room, and then when the dog is giving you the behavior that you like, that's a more appropriate time to move back into the room then.
Don D said, you said teaching bark before quiet. Should I apply that to hand nipping? Absolutely not, Don.
No.
You're going to address nipping. We have a video.
And we don't teach the dog bark. Guys, someone else asked this. We don't specifically teach the dog to bark before we teach quiet. That is just an additional exercise that we do.
It's a trick.
We teach quiet right off the bat when our dog is naturally barking. So, I have some of the dogs that I own. I did the whole bark, quiet, bark, quiet, bark, quiet. Lots of them, I just taught quiet.
Yeah.
They don't even, like Hippie doesn't really even know how to bark. So we would teach them quiet when they're already barking, and by using some of the things we're suggesting, like, banging on the crate or saying, hey, using our voice, and then good quiet when the dog is quiet. So you don't have to do it that way. That is just a additional thing that you could try. But when it comes to nipping and biting, that's a no-no. We do not let the dogs put their mouth on our skin, on our clothing, whatever it might be, ever, right from the beginning. That's not something that we allow them to do. Some people will say, you want to teach them bite inhibition, so on and so forth. There's other ways you can teach them that through games of like tug of war and like things like that. But you don't want to give mixed messages about the dog's teeth on your skin or on your clothing. It's just not a road you want to go down.
The 8:15 hour has time has come and gone. So now we're opening it up to general puppy training and dog training Q&A, but we'll still be focusing on our barking. But now's the point. If you have a general question, that we're going to have an opportunity to take a look at it.
You didn't put up the comment that I liked.
Oh, sorry. No do to boot it. I'll get it up
No,
there.
read it. I like this.
Jacqueline said, I just corrected my dog as she started barking and she stopped, and I said, good girl, in an excited voice. That was my fault. You said to do it in a calm voice. I love you guys. Thank you. Yeah, this is a great opportunity to talk to you about how you're praising your dog. In a lot of different situations.
Thing to change.
Yeah.
But for some dogs, even just the tone of your voice that you use when you're not liking what your dog's doing or when you're loving what your dog's doing, it can really make a difference for a lot of dogs.
Right, for sure. And a dog that's already on the edge of excitement, you really do need to settle into that, soothing, calm sort of praise so that you're not making them more excited.
We don't want to talk to the dog like baby talk. A lot of people
Right.
talk to their dogs as if they're a kid, and it just is not an effective way to interact with your dog. We don't want to say like sit, quiet, like everything's a question. If I'm telling you to quiet, it's not an optional command. I'm not saying, can you please be quiet for mommy?
Right.
No, not happening.
No, I insist.
It's quiet. That's enough. I'm going to be calm and assertive, not mean, not overbearing. Just this is what I want. Direct, maybe would be a better word. And then I'm going to be nice and soft and sweet with my praise.
Yeah. So we answered that one. Lots of really good questions in here. Actually, that was a compliment. I won't post it, but that was really good. Okay. Tesla Nick says, rather than say good girl or boy, I say thank you or that's better.
Yeah, so I mean, you can't. That's not wrong to do that, but it's what's good to use is to use the word that you're trying to get your dog to listen to.
Right.
So, for example,
this is a great hack. This is a dog training hack.
Ask your dog to sit, for example. When the dog sits, it's really helpful to say something like good sit and reiterate the command that your dog has responded to do, or quiet and then good quiet. Reiterating the command that your dog has responded to is a great way to associate the behavior with the word.
Right.
And it's also a great way to use the word in a really positive way because the dog's now doing it properly. They're getting praise along with it. You absolutely can say good boy, good girl, that's better, thank you. All of that stuff is what we would deem as praise. It's all good to do, but you also could specifically use the command that your dog has responded to alongside that praise. And then while we're on the topic, praise is different than your marker word. So
Right.
in our dog training, we mark the command with the word yes. You also could mark it with a click if you want as well. You can do either one. And we use that within 1 second of our dog doing the correct behavior. So I can only use sit as an example. I keep hitting this thing. I keep talking with my hands.
Yeah, and Kayle's like swimming.
I don't know why I'm doing that. So we'll use sit as an example. If I say sit, the moment my dog assumes position, I would say yes, and then I would follow that with praise. And that usually helps them to maintain the sit. So it would be yes, good sit, good girl, good boy, good sit, way to go, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't matter what you say after that. But the timing of when you say yes is crucial because that sort of, imagine the word yes and like that's, and you take a snapshot of what your dog's doing that exact moment when you say yes, that is what the dog thinks they're being rewarded for. Especially if you've done a lot of loading up the word yes. So when we're first starting our training, especially with baby puppies, we'll literally take a whole handful of their meal and we'll say yes, and then we'll feed. Yes,
Right.
and then we'll feed.
Yeah,
Yes,
loading
and then
the
we'll
yes.
feed. And the dog starts to go, oh my goodness, this word yes that you say, it's so great. Good things happen. And then we can start to utilize it when we're trying to capture behaviors that we really love.
So Eden says, or this is early in the stream, she mentions she's always got crazy high prey drive, and if there's something like possums, Australian cute ones, and I have a story about possums that happened not that long ago. They're not cute. At least the Canadian ones aren't. Bats and cats. I can stop him if I'm there with him on lead, but I'd like to learn how to train him instead. So Eden, this is your leave it command. Your leave it command is going to be so helpful. I mean, and what's so nice about the leave it?
Recall too.
Exactly, is that you can pair it with leave it. Ollie, leave it. Ollie, come. You can like sort of, there's redundancies there. So when you get a great leave it, you have like these built-in triggers for Ollie to turn away from those things. But really, Eden, I want you to focus on your leave it. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the leave it because in some cases, when your dog is barking at the window, your dog is barking at another dog across the park or at a person, using your leave it command can be a really, really helpful tool. Now, I don't know whether we need to show the leave it. We have a very thorough, comprehensive video on how to teach your dog. Let me know. Have you guys seen our leave it video? Let me know in the chat if you've seen it because it's really helpful. And if not, then I'll definitely post a link to it. But once you've taught your leave it, once you've worked on what that word, the cue, the word, and the stimulus guiding your dog away, whether it's with food at the beginning or by leash or they turn on their own, that word doesn't necessarily mean leave this toy that I put on the ground, leave this bit of food or whatever that I've put on the ground. Leave it starts to mean all sorts of things. And as you train it, you're going to do it in different places. Practice it with different distractions. You can use your leave it to mean don't focus in on that person. The first signal that your dog's going to give you before they either leave you, bark at something, lunge at something is their eye. They eye start. They're going to focus in on that thing. That's the point when you need to be the most precise. That's the time when you need to interrupt that behavior with something like your leave it. You use your leave it and you use a leave it. And if they don't leave it, it's leave it touch on their sides. Leave it turn them away with their leash. But you can use that leave it command to stop that barking before they even start. So if you're really struggling with your dog barking at people or things out in the world, maybe it's things out the window. Use your leave it and train your leave it.
Yeah, I was just about to say that. Make sure like you can't just go out on a walk and start saying leave it and expecting it to work.
Have to train it.
There's several training sessions that you need to take in order to teach your dog that the word leave it has a lot of value. So definitely check out that video because it's not a difficult exercise to train. In fact, it's like really fun to train. The dogs pick up on it really quickly, but it is something that you need to train initially in a controlled environment where there's not a lot of distractions. So it's really easy for your dog to sort of get into the groove and really like the word. And then you can start to use it more out when you're doing your walks and so on.
So Lucy mentioned that she has taught the leave it. Where did that go? It's down here somewhere. Yes, I've seen leave it. I'm teaching, but my dog, she backs away and barks when I tell her that. So Lucy, make sure she has to be on leash. You have to have more control than that. So if she's, in a situation where you're not setting her up right, then maybe you need more distance. And we talk about that in the video. Maybe you need more distance. Maybe you need to use your leave it earlier. You can't get her into a situation where she can rehearse failure. You need to set her up to be right.
And also she needs to find the word more valuable. She shouldn't hear the word and say, I'm not really into that. That means you need to go back and revisit your training and make sure that the word leave it, she says, oh my gosh, when I leave it, mom gives me chicken wieners, or she gives me steak, or she gives me my favorite tug toy, or whatever it means. There needs to be a positive reaction to your dog when she hears those words so that she's not turning and being sassy pants when you say the word to her.
Sassy
pants. She says, oh my gosh, I love that word. I love this game that you play. So training with high value rewards and really teaching the dog that good things happen. I think that's incredibly important. And back to what Ken said earlier, I think the most my sort of pet peeve of the week with our students in our classes this week was teaching people to be a bit better at reading the dog's decision-making process. And again, I take for granted my ability to do it as a dog trainer for, well over 25
How
years.
long? Yeah.
A long time. So you're thinking, God, Kelly, you look so young. How could you be training dogs for that long?
I knew it was going to go in that direction. I apologize if anybody was wearing a microphone.
Anyways, my parents started the McCann dog trays business, so I've been around it since I was a kid. But anyway, so I can read it really easily, and I can see the dogs give these signs. And there's so much opportunity to prevent things from going south if you just are able to react and redirect the dog a little bit sooner, rather than allowing the dog to look and then decide and then get completely invested in something and then try to pull them away. You think of the distractions like a magnet. The closer they are to the distraction, the harder it is to pull them away. But if you get them a little bit distracted, you like that analogy?
I like that.
Oh.
Yeah. Interesting one.
If you react earlier, it's easier to redirect them because the magnet, it's not as strong.
Yeah. It's funny. Why did you say it like that?
I don't know. I just thought it would get a rise out of you.
And it worked. Dropping knowledge here in the train station. It's interesting that you'd use
I'm going to do this every
it.
time you horn.
Oh, pretty good.
I'm on it.
Oh, I almost caught her. It's interesting that you'd use the analogy of a magnet. I often think of it as sort of like zones, like circles that you once you get in it changes the color of the circle, or it makes it more difficult for your dog because
I feel like your analogy is more complicated than mine.
Yeah, I think it is. But I really like the fact that when you talk with the magnet, as it gets closer, it gets more challenging, and that is precisely the struggle that your dog has. And we're not just talking about greeting another dog or greeting another person, but like that barking. So if your dog barks at a thing, that's somebody walking by on the street. That's the magnet. And how polarizing is their magnet? I don't know a lot about magnets. I didn't study physics at all in school. Eden Fraser dropping the.
Also want to give a
She didn't do it. We got her.
Shoot. I already forgot.
Yeah.
Want to give a thanks to Shandy Blake for helping us out
Yeah,
today.
Shandy is knocking it out of the park
Shandy,
tonight.
Thank you, girl.
She's the...
you the woman.
We need to come up with something for Shandy.
Yeah. Shandy, she's so handy.
Yeah.
He doesn't like
Handy
it?
Shandy the moderator? I don't
Handy
know.
Shandy.
We'll figure something out.
Dandy Shandy is so handy.
What else did we want to
These
talk
are terrible.
about here?
I'm sorry, Shandy.
So if you find, and I know this is something that a lot of people... Okay, so barking through excitement. So there are a couple of questions here. Barking for someone to throw the ball, and barking when it's playtime. I'm just going to try to find it here. Judy mentioned a small dog I've had had for 5 years, never barked when we played fetch. It just started. At times she will bark very loud for me to throw the ball. I hold the ball and I won't throw it. What else can I do?
Well, I might maybe practice a little bit where you have your dog on the leash, have the leash in your hand, and just start by sort of faking the dog out with the ball. And if you do that and your dog is quiet, then I would say good quiet, and I would give her the ball or throw the ball. But if you have the leash in your hand and you start moving the ball around and you start getting barking, then I would calmly say quiet, and then I would just lift up on the leash so her collar goes up underneath her chin a little bit, just as a little uncomfortable for her, and then loosen it and tell her good quiet when she's not barking anymore. And if you're able to do that a couple times and she's silent about it, good girl, go get it, and then throw the ball and make it a big deal. But it's very difficult to address if you don't have a leash on or a line on or something in your hand, because otherwise you just end up trying to say a command and the dog might not understand what it means.
The other thing, I just thought about something that I did.
The magnet analogy is brilliant. Thanks, Tesla Nick.
One thing I would do with one of our dogs is they'd come in, they were so excited, I would get them to lie down. I'd ask them to lie down. When that happened, I'd praise them for lying down. Then I'd tell them to go around.
Yeah, give them a job.
Yeah, you give your dog a job. Give them something to do. Break it up so that it's not bark, bark, bark. Here comes the ball, or bark, bark, bark. If I wait long enough, she'll throw the ball. Give them a job. Make them lie down. Get them to sit in at your side. Get them to do something.
Did your dog do this?
So that it disconnects. They could be excellent. Good. I see that's the perfect thing for the Halloween show, is sounding evil like that. We need to talk about barking at other dogs on walks, and this is something that we hear from a lot of our students, and this is all about the timing. Now, we've set you up tonight talking about watching your dog's eyes, really understanding what their magnet is like, what that threshold is for them. especially when it comes to barking at other dogs, you need to figure out ways to stay outside of that those thresholds, out away from those zones where your dog is going to bark, where you're sure that they're going to bark, because while you're training it, you don't want to rehearse failure. So that might mean that while you're working on this, you're walking in quiet areas. And I mentioned this to a student the other night, and she said, well, I have to take my dog for a walk. Well, maybe that means a different time of day. You know, maybe there's the busyness after work or something.
And it comes back to if you want to train the dog well, you got to make some changes. You can't just do the same old thing. Keep going with what you're saying. It's excellent.
No, that's it. Changing your time of day, changing where you're going. Maybe you don't, if you're struggling with, again, like things like walking on leash or barking while your dog walks on leash, then don't practice those things. Don't rehearse the bad behavior without practicing it. Maybe you break it down. It's not about maybe, and I don't know, 1.6 kilometer walk is a mile. We have lots of American
for those
visitors
non-Canadians
here on the train station. So if you, rather than going for a mile walk, maybe you go for several short walks, or maybe you do some fetch or retrieving or tug or do something else with your dog.
Tire them out first.
Barking means the same thing. So find that area, that distance that you can be successful. Maybe that means someone's coming up, you cross the street. You go to the other side of the street, not on the dog to dog side, but you have like on the human side. So if my dog's walking at my left, I'm going to cross the street so that I pass that other dog as they're over there. So
you're between the distraction and your dog.
Exactly. So that I'm between them. Maybe it means turning around the other way. Maybe I head the other direction. Leave that this way, and a small bump on the leash, and we go the other way.
And because remember, we said this before, but I think it's important to say again is, dogs learn through repetition, and you need to look at what type of repetition is your dog rehearsing right now. Are they repeating the wrong things over and over again, or are they repeating the correct things over and over again? And if the answer is they're repeating every time you go for a walk, your dog's always barking at other dogs, they're always making poor choices, they're always pulling on the leash, or whatever it is, you're accidentally repeating the wrong stuff. So what you need to do is change it so that it's easier for you to at least get the right stuff happening a little bit, so you can get some rewards in there. Because if they never do it right in any scenario, how are they ever going to know that that's what you prefer? So it might mean going at a different time of the night. I think Shandy, right? Midnight walkers unite.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. When I have a young dog, I think about, when am I going to go for a walk? What's going on outside? How can I make this easier for myself and easier for my dog? And as you continue your training, and even other things in your dog's training starts to improve, like their recall, their ability to stay, you do some trick trainings, you're building a bond. What happens is that when you go into a harder situation, like taking your dog for a walk where you're getting barking, your dog's far more likely to respect you and listen to you in that moment if you've done other training in other situations, because the dog's starting to learn to look for you for advice and for feedback and for gratification and for all of these different things. So, sometimes people have a hard time in dogs understanding that, like, if you have a good sit stay, it would help your dog's walking on leash. Or if you have a good quiet command, it would help your dog from not jumping up, because it's all related to, does your dog care to listen to you or not? And that's really what it comes down to. So often when you fix lots of behaviors, other behaviors that you're struggling with, it won't necessarily be perfect. I'm not saying it will magically appear better, but it will be easier to accomplish. When I have a good solid foundation on my dogs because of all of the training that I do, I just don't end up I've never had my dog bark at a person going for a walk. I typically don't have them, like some of the mistakes that come up, we don't have, because the solid foundation is so strong that you don't run into those problems.
Well, and because we've had to deal with it with our students so often that we know some of the pitfalls.
Yeah, my very first dog that I tried to train, I would take him outside and he would run around, and then I would have to call my mom on the phone to help me get him back, and I would be crying because I wanted to be like this big dog trainer, and I couldn't get the dog to come back to me. I was 13 years old, mind you. But you learn. Every dog you learn from, and then you get better.
Betty Ann, I know Betty Ann's had a couple comments on here. I pulled up a Mitch's leash when he gets overexcited, and he will get frustrated, then jump up to stop me. Then it becomes a bad cycle. So I know, Betty Ann,
change the technique.
You do have some struggles with some of this stuff, but if you're having troubles with jumping up, then you work on that jumping up behavior. Maybe you need an equipment change to give you more leverage. I think Betty Ann's been here before, and she's mentioned that she's worked with a couple of trainers. I maybe
she's been a student at our place.
Oh, she has.
Yeah,
okay,
with Mitch.
Oh, right, with Mitch, right. Yeah. So you need to figure out
how with Mitch.
Right, I totally forgot about that. So you need to address that with that, your down correction with when Mitch jumps up. Your off correction. When Mitch jumps up, you use your hand, you use that leash down.
Yeah, Mitch is a good dog. He's just can be a bit wild sometimes.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you don't allow this kind of thing, him to rehearse it. And when you mentioned that, pulling up on him, I'm not really sure whether that's while you're walking, because I know that she mentioned that he was walking while this was happening. I pulled him, which was overexcited.
I think it's important with something like this is always try to use your leash and your correction in opposition to what the dog wants to do. So if you lift up on the leash because he's done something you don't like, and he has been smart enough to figure out that if he comes up, the leash tension releases and he can be a little bit bratty with you, then you want to work in opposition. So like what Ken said, I would then use the leash downward towards the floor and tell him off. And then if he decides to be stinker on the floor, then I might lift the leash up. So I'm going to work in opposition until I'm the one that ends the conversation. What you want to do is sort of keep at it until he finally goes, oh, fine, I'll relax. And as soon as you have that little winning moment, you're going to jump on it and say, good boy, good settler, good offer, whatever you're doing in the moment. And then give him something to do before the whole thing can turn into a circle. If it's turning into a vicious circle, you need to change that direction to something else so that it can't loop back around again. Maybe you say, let's go, and you walk him away a few steps, or you tell him lie down, or something that puts you in the driver's seat and gets him thinking about something else.
Couple questions. I know we've moved into the we're in overtime. We're doing overtime, and actually this week I can't.
The kids are going to be so sad outside that we are not giving out candy.
I know. Well, or also that means we end up with more candy.
Oh, Ken has a serious Awful. Candy obsession.
I know. Christina mentions, hi, my golden 4-month-old puppy jumps up on everything, everyone, and all furniture. I do tug and sound, but she doesn't stop. So part of this, Christina, for sure. Again, I know you've been to a few train station shows now, but that house line is going to be helpful. Don't allow her to get to this state of mind. When she starts to get really, really excited, you can use that leash and redirect her. We talk a lot about giving your dog a job, rewarding your dog for, it's like I know someone had mentioned counter conditioning in here a little bit earlier, rewarding your dog for maintaining on her bed. You go ask her to lie down on her bed, really build value for that. Focus on that as an exercise so that when she starts to get all excited and stuff, you can ask her to go lie down on her bed, and you've started to build that in as part of your daily routine. But things like jumping up on everyone and all of the furniture, you mustn't allow her to rehearse that kind of thing. When she gets to that state of mind, you're going to insist that she sits. Maybe she remains in a sit at your side, and you work through that. And if you feel like it's not a moment that you can train, then she should go in her crate, because you don't want her to have the opportunity to rehearse it over and over again. But and you mentioned she just doesn't stop. Well, you need to control when she does stop. Really, be a great leader for her. So when she's getting super excited and out of control, then you'll step in and give her good information. What are you doing here?
Oh, there's just a conversation going on about muzzle training.
Oh, yeah.
And that's not something that we use with our training
at
all. But, I mean, I guess there's some situations where it can be appropriate. I don't know. You sound like you have a difference of opinion on it.
I do. Well, it's no different than a gentle leader, I think, in terms of something being on the dog's face.
You can't really redirect their head with a muzzle. It just simply prevents them from opening their mouth. And, of course, that's better than the dog, biting people if that's what the problem is. But I think a gentle leader might be a good option to use, so you can redirect their head. They can still bite with a gentle leader on for sure, but I don't know. Just there's lots going on there.
Yeah, it's busy chat. Yeah. So one thing I forgot to do, and if you have any questions, now is a great time to ask them, because this is we're moving into the end of the train station. But what's so important about the end of the train station is we have Anchor is the platform that we podcast on, and every week we get questions. We get questions from you at home, and maybe we'll be answering your question, your voice call today. But there's a link in the description for you to call in and leave us a message. So we're going to check out what our Anchor call-in question is.
While you're doing
today.
that, Betty Ann says, hey, Kayl, do you do private lessons? I personally don't do a lot of private lessons at the school just because of my schedule, but we do have several trainers on staff that teach private lessons for all kinds of things. And what you were asking about before, they would absolutely be able to help you through and show you exactly what to do. You just need to call the school and we can get that set up for you.
So our call today comes from Lauren Flynn. So I don't know whether Lauren will be watching tonight, but this is our anchor call in. So definitely click that link in the description if you have a voice question for us. But let's see what Lauren has to say or has to ask.
So training is twice as hard. They love sleeping in the crate together, but I'm wondering if this is impeding with their training after watching a lot of your videos. I haven't been able to find much information on training two puppies simultaneously, so any help will be very welcome. Thank you. I love your channel. Thanks again.
Well, thanks, Lauren. Yeah, I did. I think maybe she started recording. She was speaking before she started recording. But training two puppies at the same time. This is something we get questions. It's a lot. You know, you've done it.
It's crazy.
Yeah, you've done it. So talk about how
I don't recommend it.
How you were able to.
It's doable, but I wouldn't. That would not be my choice. That's for sure. Mm-hmm.
For sure. Now, what did you do to help those dogs to be more successful? Because it is a lot more work, but it needs to be. Yeah. You know, you could take some shortcuts and keep them both in the same kennel and train them at the same time, but that's not going to give them the best information.
I got very little sleep, but I did everything individually.
Yeah.
So I walked them separately. I trained them separately. They were not loose in the house at the same time. When one was in a crate, the other one was with me and interacting, or they were both in a crate so I could like have some sanity. And then I would switch them up. I waited until I had better control on each of them individually before I started working them together so that they had some skills so that I could address each of them individually and have them listen. Otherwise, it was just, be a big free-for-all where they just wanted to play with each other. I was also very careful that I didn't crate them together, and I didn't crate them side by side. In fact, I crated them in different rooms. When you have puppies at the same time, there's a really, really big risk that they are going to bond to each other much faster and more deeply than they are going to bond to you. And that can really hurt your relationship with your dog and your ability to be successful in your training, because the dog's basically saying, I don't really care about you. I love my brother. I love my sister. I'd rather do that. We also can see some confidence issues if the dogs are spending too much time together, because typically one dog is usually the more in charge one or the more confident one, and the other one tends to be more of a follower. And when you take the confident one away from the mix, sometimes the follower, more type puppy can really not function well independently, or vice versa. Sometimes the confident one isn't quite so confident when you take its little follower away.
Right.
So the individual stuff is really, really important. It's absolutely doable, but it is a lot of work. And once you sort of get through the hump of the initial training, then it's really not so bad. We've had kind of puppies at the same time. Hippie and our dog Rad that we had were very similar in age. They were less than a year apart, but we had two dog trainers and two puppies. So it was pretty easy to sort of, do things together and work together, use, one another as a distractions. And then also we could separate as well. So if it's, one person and two puppies, it is a little bit more challenging, but it's doable. You just gotta do everything individually for a long time until they're ready to be together.
And this is where we'll hear a student mention, I got two puppies and they just hate being apart. And this is exactly, as Kayl mentioned, this is what you'll see.
So bad
so
for
it's
them.
really important that you do give them some independence, not only for the puppies, but for your relationship, really understanding how they're going to learn, really building, that trust, being clear, consistent, and fair with them each and every time means that you're devoted to that one puppy's success for that training period. So it's a lot of work, Lauren, but you can get through it. You can do it. Yeah, you can get through it. I mean, we've done it. Lots of people have done it, but you do need to really focus on each puppy.
It is important you educate yourself on the things to do and not to do, because if you let them spend too much time together, or you sort of go down the wrong path, and then all of a sudden the dog's turn 6, 7, 8 months old and you want to try and change things, it's going to be a lot harder. So you want to start things early, so that it's a little easier to deal with.
For sure. Well, I have to say a huge thank you to Shandy Blake, who was just rocking it. Handy Shandy Blake in the chat. If you enjoyed, if this is your first time on the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We publish new videos every week to help you to have a well-behaved four-legged family member. And I hope we were able to give you some insight tonight about barking. And this is something we may be recording a video about at some point, maybe some of the things that we talked about. I like that magnet idea. Maybe we could dive a little deeper into that.
Yeah.
If you feel like you enjoyed the show, you want to grab a team tee. It's the tees we're wearing right now. I don't know if we have coffee mugs available right now, your morning training mug, but we do have the team tee. They're pretty sweet.
Yeah,
and you can grab one at a link in the description. Now, tomorrow is when we launch this month's, free workshop. I hope that works. See, it's so fun when the tech stuff works. Yep, there it goes. So click that link and you can jump into our free dog training mystery box workshop. Thank you guys for joining us. Thank you for joining us. I know there are lots of people here from across the pond that have stayed up really late, and we hope you got some value from tonight. But we do these for you, and you guys,
every Thursday,
we're a big part of the show.
It'll send you a notification and let you know when we're going to be on air.
Absolutely. With that said, thanks to everybody for joining us tonight. I'm Ken.
I'm Kayl.
Happy training. Check out these links when we go. Bye, guys.